How many times should we forgive one another? Up to 7 times? In order for me to explain my theory, I'm going to have to take you back to the Old Testament. So strap in, because here we go.
I may never march in the infantry, but my feet are firm with the gospel of peace and the sword of the Spirit at my right hand.
I may never ride in the cavalry, but the belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness are my defense and security.
I may never shoot the artillery, but I will take up the shield of faith and extinguish the deceiving darts of the devil.
And I may never fly over the enemy, but my mind is protected by the helmet of salvation.
We are the Lord's army.
Hi, thanks for watching the Godly Rebels channel. I'm JD, and today I'm going to take you through the story where Peter asked Jesus how many times we should forgive each other. Now that's found in Matthew 18. I'm going to read it just in case you don't know what we're talking about. Starting in verse 21. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus said to him, I do not say to you up to 7 times, but up to 70 times 7. So there you have it. But what does it mean? I'm sure a lot of us have heard the explanation that 490 is a big number and just hard to keep track of, right? You can forgive your brother or sister 490 times, but by the time you get up to, 300, 400, you lose track. So you kind of just start over again, 301, 302. I know I heard that when I was younger, and when I was thinking about forgiving my sister or brother who sinned against me, I'm like, that's a lot. But there may be another explanation that is even greater than 490 times. Is there anywhere else in the Bible that we see the numbers 70 times 7? Maybe that's what we should be asking. So first, let me take you to Matthew chapter 24. I know some of you are probably already thinking, Matthew 24, that's the Olivet Discourse. Why are we going there? But it'll all be clear pretty soon. Let me just recap for those who don't know what Matthew 24 is talking about. Jesus is with the disciples, and they ask him, what will be signs of his coming, and when will the end times be? And then Jesus goes on to explain an entire timeline about that. And you can watch that in another video that I have coming out. So stay tuned for that. But there is one verse in particular that I want to point out that proves Jesus knows what he's talking about. I want to prove that he has read the book of Daniel in the Old Testament and that he has studied what Daniel's talking about. Now the verse I want to talk about is Matthew 24 verse 15, and I'll read it. So when you see standing in the holy place the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. That's really all I want to get out of this chapter, that Jesus knows about Daniel and that he references Daniel. So let's go back to the book of Daniel, chapter 9, and I'm going to start in verse 24. 77s are decreed for your people in your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. I want to pause just for a moment here to explain what 77s are. It's really a heptad, so 70 groups of 7. And it's largely believed that the groups of 7 are actually 7 years. So really it's 70 times 7 years. There's that number, 70 times 7. But what does that mean? Now the next 2 verses are a little bit lengthy, and you can read them for yourself, but really I'm just going to give you the abridged version. Basically what it's saying is that from the time the decree was given to rebuild Jerusalem all the way to where Jesus came on the earth and then died is a total of 69 groups of 7. So 69 times 7 years is 483 years. And scholars have actually figured this out and backtracked the dating and everything like that, so everything makes sense and it all fits in that time frame wonderfully, almost like God planned it that way. But if we were paying attention, there was only 69 groups of 7, which leaves 1 missing. So I'm going to read now the last verse in that chapter, and it will explain that. He, this is believed to be the Antichrist, will confirm a covenant with many for 1 7. In the middle of the 7, he He will put an end to the sacrifice and offering. And at the temple he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. So that is where we see the last group of 7. And a lot of people believe that's the tribulation, 7 years of the tribulation. And then it went on to say that halfway through that 7-year period is when the Antichrist will set up the Abomination of Desolation. And that, my friends, is what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24. The Abomination of Desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel. But you're still probably wondering, what does this have to do with anything, right? What does that mean? Or what do I mean by 70 times 7? So, let me explain it. So what the 70 sets of 7 in Daniel show us is when the end will be. We had those 69 sets of 7 up until Jesus died, and now we're kind of just going through time until we hit that last 7, which starts the tribulation, and then by the end of that 7 years is when Jesus returns. And like it said in Daniel chapter 9 verse 24, there were 77s were decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness. Now there's a lot of complicated stuff that happens at the end times, including the tribulation, including after the tribulation. But for simplicity's sake, when Jesus comes back, we will not be sinning anymore. Those who believe in Jesus are going to get glorified bodies, and we're going to be transformed in a twinkling of an eye. And those of us who are transformed will then no longer be sinning. Now let's go back to Matthew 18 and think about that story one more time. Let's think about what Jesus says. Truly I say, not 7 times, but 70 times 7. Let's think about that. What if Jesus meant 70 times 7 as in the end when Jesus comes back? How much greater would that be? Jesus wants us to forgive each other until the Lord returns. That's so much more than 490 times. Because although 490 is a big number, it is still finite, and you can still check it off your list. Even if we lose track of how many times we've forgiven somebody else, in our minds we're still thinking, I have forgiven you way too many times already, that's enough. But if we think in our minds about forgiving until Jesus comes back, then we will never be done forgiving each other until Jesus comes back. So how about you? What do you think about this explanation? And regardless, if you agree or disagree, like it or dislike it, forgiveness is still something that Jesus wants us all to be doing. Jesus would want us to be humble and not think of ourselves more highly than anybody else, just because they have sinned against us. Because God knows we have sinned against others too, and in return, we would want forgiveness. So I'd like to encourage you all just to forgive each other. It is what Jesus would want. And don't keep track. Thanks for watching this video. I'd appreciate any comments down below. I'd like to know your thoughts. If you agree or disagree, if you like it, dislike it. And let's remember to stay in the Word and put on the full armor of God every day. God bless.